Yeah, there we go. All right. So, for those of you who are interested, the Conspiracy of Angels came out last year. I do not have a formal cover reveal for the online folks. You don't get to see it yet. You get to see it on May 23rd. But this is going to be the cover of book 2, and it is Harsh Gods. And that is a blurb from Jim Butcher, who had some really, really kind things to say about the book, which make me really, really happy, because the whole switching to fiction was an interesting process. And being who I am, I can't not keep writing more stuff. So there's the 3 books in the first trilogy, but there's a novella in between each of them. And this one is called Promises. And I'm just going to pick up and drop you on in. We'll read to a certain point, and then I will give you guys an option of more or shut up and sit down. Lil had rooms at the Renaissance Hotel downtown. The lobby thronged with people, the combined murmur of their voices and minds surging in a subsonic tide of meaning that battered against my psychic senses. The shields I directed barely held against the weltering din. I'd forgotten how close it was to the holiday, sequestered as I'd been in my basement office beneath the Cleveland Museum of Art. Now, standing under the vaulted arches of the gilded Jazz Age Hotel, there was no ignoring the frantic, emotional buzz of Valentines and their sweethearts seeking to make the most of the weekend. Between the frenetic clientele of the nearby casino and the clusters of richly dressed couples, each putting out their own unique cocktails of excitement and agitation, the psychic space was suffocating. I put my back against a wall and silently willed Lil to hurry the fuck up. She'd offered to take me up to the room with her, but that would have been worse than enduring the mental cacophony. The last thing I needed was alone time on Valentine's weekend in a posh hotel suite with the Lady of Beasts. Not that Lil wasn't painfully desirable. That was actually the problem. Lil's cloying seduction was just another weapon in her already potent arsenal, and she'd turned it more than a few times on me. Never mind that I'd been dating her dead sister. Never mind that in some distant incarnation she'd been married to my brother Remy. Those weren't even moral speed bumps for the Lady of Beasts. She would come on to me just to watch me squirm, and after fighting with Layla's binding, I didn't have the patience for that shit. There was a clock above the front desk, and I watched the minute hand as if I expected to see it move in real time. A boisterous couple threaded through the crowd, shifting toward the outskirts to avoid some of the crush of people. The woman stumbled, just tipsy enough to totter on her heels and nearly crash into me. Her husband, a guy who looked like one of his parents had been in an armored truck, caught her elbow, then glowered at me like the lady's misstep was my fault. Muscle ticked in his square jaw, and his eyes locked onto mine. I knew that look. On some level, he sensed my cowl, the cloak of woven will and power that I used to hide my not-quite-human nature. Most mortals never notice, but every once in a while I encountered one with enough sight to realize there was something off about me. My height, the faded black jeans, and the biker jacket didn't help matters any, especially not in this well-dressed scene. I dropped my own gaze. I'd learned from experience that eye contact only made it worse. I didn't need a fight on my hands, and there was no way to explain to the guy that what he was feeling was simply instinct. Instinct bred into the mortals over 6 millennia that told them people like me were dangerous. He wasn't exactly wrong. I stared at my scuffed and muddied engineer boots clamping down on the camouflaging veil of energy. I could feel my wings ghosting through the shimmering gold curtain behind me. I pulled them tight against my body and tried to be nothing more than an ordinary guy. Nothing to see here. Move along. Mr. Brink's truck blinked several times rapidly, then put a protective arm around his lady's shoulders. Helping her toward the elevators, he cast a final scowl at me before the doors closed. Once they slid shut, I tilted my head back and loosed the breath I'd been holding. I still wasn't used to all this shit. The incident with Durimiel back in November meant that I was relearning practically everything. It sucked. I kept my eyes away from the people and tried concentrating on the subtle murmur of the fountain burbling in the lobby. I could just hear it beneath the rhythm of the voices. Massive chandeliers glinted high above me. Their gilded accents echoed in all the Baroque railings winding up the stairs. Between the gold, the soaring pillars, and the rich Italian marble, the Cleveland Renaissance felt more like a temple than a hotel, wearing its throwback splendor without apology. That sudden sharp awareness of the timelessness of the space tipped the balance in my vision. All the lights went starry, and the layers of reality shuffled over themselves until different styles and eras all danced in a confusion of perceptions. I saw women in bustled skirts and men with fedoras all mingling with the modern crowd in their holiday finery. Most of the specters were blurry, their faces indistinct, as often they were on the Shadowside. These were not ghosts, but echoes of the once living, stamped like fingerprints in time. I turned to face the windows, hoping to pull my perceptions back to the fleshbound world. But that just brought me face to face with her. She stood outside on the street, staring in at me. I might have taken her for a living person if not for her coat. She wore a light spring jacket that should have left her freezing in the harsh wind scouring the city from the lake. I saw her in shades all faded to monochrome, a simple but elegant dress that looked hand-sewn, fancy hat with a little veil, prim cloth gloves, corsage on her lapel. Her dark skin was smooth and clear, full lips struggling with a melancholy expression. I could imagine the color of her eyes, deep brown, startling against the whites. From the way she studied me, I could tell she didn't quite understand what she was looking at. Our eyes met, and she startled a little as she realized I could see her. This was no mere echo of a life stamped upon the Shadowside. Conscious and self-aware, this ghost remembered enough of herself to project a clear, unwavering image. Urgency creased her features, and her lips parted on the verge of some message. When she spoke, I heard nothing more than a dry whisper, as if the one thing the spirit couldn't recall was her voice. The dead woman raised one hand and lightly pressed her gloved fingers against the glass, beseeching. The Renaissance was so old, the window was a barrier to the both of us. I raised my own hand, responding to the specter. Lil chose precisely that moment to sidle up from the crowd, jamming an elbow sharply into my ribs. "Hey, Flyboy, what are you staring at?" The wraith jerked back from the window, as if pulled on a cord. My vision faltered. When I saw her next, she was halfway down the sidewalk, headed toward Prospect Avenue. Her image stuttered as late evening shoppers strode through the same space she occupied. Streaking lights of cars and taxicabs burned trails against my eyes as I strained to keep the spirit in my sight. She halted a moment, catching my gaze from over her shoulder. Then she faded completely, her gray-scale figure dispersing into the night. "Damn it, Lil," I grumbled. "You scared her away." "Was that a ghost?" Lil tossed her head with a scoff. The gesture sent wild waves of her dark red hair cascading down her back. "Mother's tears, Zackwiel," she swore. "You attract dead mortals like stray puppies." "She needs my help," I objected. "Sure she does. So does every dead thing for miles, if you give it half a chance. You really need to learn how to tune that shit out." She shifted her sable driving coat to her other arm, adjusting her grip on her white leather purse. She'd changed out of the navy dress from earlier and now wore a pantsuit of the same dark hue. "There are reasons I can see the things I do," I insisted. Lil gave me a flat look. I thrust my hands into the pocket of my jacket and turned away from the window. "With everything you've forgotten, why couldn't you lose the self-righteous streak?" she complained. "It's not like I asked to get my brain shredded by a monomaniacal asshole," I retorted. "Anyhow, how is it your business if I want to help her out?" "If it interferes with what I want, that makes it my business. Or did you forget about the cacodemons?" Lil gave me a shove in the direction of the hotel bar. "Our meeting. Now." I dug in my heels, gesturing vaguely at the milling crowd. "Way too loud in here. I can't think straight," I explained. "How can you tell?" Half a dozen bitter retorts leapt to my lips, and I surprised myself by swallowing every one of them. I turned in the opposite direction from the bar and started walking. Lil hovered by the liquid fall of golden curtains, storm-gray eyes tracking me till I was halfway to the revolving doors. "You coming?" I called, pitching my voice so it carried over the noise of the revelers. Again the disdainful scoff and toss of her head. Lil followed the gesture up by rolling her eyes so hard she should have been shooting craps as well as daggers. "Fine," she called back, "but you chase after that dead girl on your own time." She nearly shouted it. It was a testament to the mind-numbing din in the lobby that not a single person blinked at her statement. I am getting a low battery thing, so if I cut out in this next part, Periscope folks, I apologize. It is at 10%. I might go away. Yes, if you recognize me, I've been on TV, Paranormal State, and pretty much every vampire documentary for the past 25 years. Hi. My name's Michelle Belanger for the new Periscope folks who don't see me, and now we will get back to the story. I lingered on the sidewalk beside Superior Avenue, searching the cityscape for any sign of the ghost. The wind racing across the lake from Canada carried with it wicked razors of cold. They lashed at my ears and cheeks, and I knew it was bad because I could actually feel the chill. All the mortals walked bent over on themselves, heads down against the wind and arms folded over their precious centers of heat. February was rarely a kind month in Cleveland. The only thing sizzling were sentiments on Hallmark cards. Lil stepped through the revolving doors, settling her driving coat around her shoulders. The heels of her polished leather boots clicked smartly on the pavement as she approached. I think I died.
Oh, we've got a power source now.
Oh, good. Well, you can go sort that out.
Yeah, you plug the phone, if you plug in.
Okay.
It adjusts to the battery for whatever your phone needs.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Yeah, we're getting power because we're going to die in a minute here, otherwise. And I apologize for the wiggly bit, because I have to move this so you can actually plug in. Oh yeah, there's a tab there. Hello to Sweden. Ah! Yes. Pardon me while I make you all go sideways for a while. And thank you all for being patient while we do this. Ah! There we go. Yay. Ha. Now you can see my ugly mug. Lil stepped through the revolving doors, settling her driving coat around her shoulders. The heels of her polished leather boots clicked smartly on the pavement as she approached. "All right, where to?" she asked. Her hair whipped like scarlet serpents around her heart-shaped face. I scanned the street again, squinting as I peered consciously across to the Shadowside. Gliding movement drew my attention to the corner of Prospect and Superior. An RTA bus lumbered into view, dispersing the frail figure of the specter, but I was certain she'd been standing there. I headed in that direction. Lil jogged to keep pace with my long-legged strides. "You're not fooling me, you know," she complained. I chewed my lip as I kept my vision poised between the two sides of reality. It took more concentration than I knew it should have. I was still relearning things. My frustration vented itself in snark. "That's good," I replied. "Wouldn't want your staggering sense of superiority to falter." Lil smacked the back of her hand into my bicep hard enough that I could feel the sting of her knuckles through my jacket's thick leather. She did things like that a lot. It would have seemed abusive if I didn't know the kind of violence she could inflict when she was actually trying. Up ahead, I spied the striped awning of a restaurant. Dark blue alternating with white, I could just make out letters on the sign above it. Aradia's. The spirit winked into view for a moment, flickering against the restaurant's front window. "You in the mood for Italian?" I asked. I crossed the street before she could object. The interior of the restaurant was dark but cozy, caught somewhere between a bar and a bistro. A crepe streamer of pink and red hearts was tacked above the bar, the only nod to the holiday. The rest of the decor consisted of old black and white photos arranged in clusters on the wood-paneled walls. Many of them seemed like family portraits, interspersed with scenes from bygone decades of Cleveland. The Soldiers and Sailors Monument, the old May Company building, a parade for what looked like the Feast of the Assumption along Little Italy's Murray Hill. Pale votives burned in squat settings of cobalt glass in the center of every table. There were perhaps 5 other people in the entire establishment, 3 of them sitting at the bar. Empty as the place was, the scent of food coming from the kitchen was amazing. The bartender, a stout man in his middle 40s, built like a pickle barrel with legs, looked up as we entered. His name tag caught the light, proclaiming him Benny. He stared for a long moment, his heavy brow beetling with disapproval. Maybe it was the biker jacket. I held my cowl tight. I didn't want a repeat of earlier. The ghost flickered into view at the very back of the restaurant, disappearing through the doors that looked like they led to the kitchen. I almost charged after her, but managed to hold my ground behind the "Please wait to be seated" sign near the hostess stand. No way, Lil said after a quick turnaround. She headed out to go. I caught her elbow, my attention still fixed on that spot where the spirit had disappeared. Hang on. Lil shrugged me off. Dropping her voice to a whisper, she hissed, Something isn't right here, Zach. Pick another restaurant. She's here, I responded. You're probably feeling that. You think I can't see her, Lil snapped. I just don't care about every lost little ghost. Come on, there's a shawarma place around the corner. I'm not leaving. Not until I have some idea what she wants. Lil rolled her eyes, complaining, Nights like this, I really miss the old Zach. I'm not that guy anymore, I shot back angrily. Lil gave me a speculative look. The flickering light from the votives picked out shades of gold and onyx in her otherwise storm-gray eyes. No, she assented. No, you're not. An odd note in her voice made me bite back the remains of my tirade. The emotion was echoed in her bronze features, keen and bright as a lightning strike. That look stirred memories of some significant moment from the past. Jazz music, a smoky alto, a long, sleek dress with a midnight's wealth of stars. As soon as I grabbed for them, the images dissolved, subtle as smoke. Memory was like that now. Even the few scraps left to me remained elusive. The kid at the hostess stand interrupted, menus tucked neatly under one arm. Olive-skinned, with a silky fall of dark hair, her eyes were bright as newly minted pennies. She studied first Lil and then myself. The broad expanse of her brow and the little cleft in her chin echoed the features of the bartender, though nature had painted her with a much more delicate hand. The girl offered us a practiced and very convincing smile, asking mildly, A table in back? Yeah, that would be great, I said. The hostess headed off, and I strode swiftly after her. Lil hesitated near the front of the restaurant, her full lips twisted into something very close to a pout. She eyed the doors for a moment as if plotting her escape. Then, muttering curses in a language long dead, she joined me at the table in the back. Rigidly polite with the waitress, she took her menu and held it open between us. I felt like I was staring across the Great Wall of China. Get on with it already, she grumbled, not looking up. What? I asked. The memories still rattled uneasily in the back of my head, hollow echoes like pebbles tumbling down a very deep well. Whatever the hell you're going to do with the ghost, she responded. Have a heart-to-heart, send her into the light, something. Just get it out of your system so we can talk. No one's twisting your arm to stay, you know, I reminded. She grunted a non-comment and went back to glaring at her menu. We were matched, stubborn for stubborn, so I dropped it. I might have a penchant for tilting at windmills, but with Lil, I knew when to quit. I closed my eyes, focusing on my sense of the space. The patrons, the flow of history along the walls, the conspicuous absence that was Lil as she shielded herself from me. My senses expanded, little fingers of light tracing all the dark corners to see what they held. There was a subtle thrumming on the air, and it grew more pronounced as I concentrated. We were near a crossing, a little tear between the realms of spirit and flesh. That didn't bode well for the dead woman. Crossings most often showed up in places where someone had suffered a traumatic death. It was starting to look like my ghost was a murder victim. The edge of the crossing was close. I could almost touch it if I extended my wings back far enough, but the heart of the disturbance lay beyond the doors to the kitchen. I dropped into a deeper focus, reaching with my mind as far as I could into that central pulse of terror and pain. Echoes of the spirit's imprint flickered on the edge of perception, the dark curves of her face, her eyes, tearful, pleading. Then I felt a jolt like I'd run headlong into an electric fence. Light and symbols exploded in my head. I shook myself, blinking. What did you just do? Lil hissed. The bartender's head whipped around and he glared at us. I could feel his attention crawling against my scalp. Hey, what are you doing back there? He called. I told you so, Lil mouthed. The place is warded, isn't it? I tried to clamp down on my cowl and look innocent, but it was way too late for that. The bartender threw his dish rag aside and headed our way. His big, meaty hands looked more accustomed to breaking jaws than polishing glasses, and he brandished them at me as he stomped toward our table. You're so good at making friends, Lil snarked. I got up hurriedly from my chair, holding a hand out to halt the guy. Hey, we're just paying customers here. Oh, baloney, you know what I'm talking about, he rumbled. His accent was so thick, he sounded like he was making a conscious mockery of The Godfather. And then he squinted at me and said, "Wait a minute, I know you. You're one of Salvatore's goons." Salvatore? I wondered, turning to Lil. Does he mean Celerio? Sal was one of my many siblings, and somewhere along the line she had decided she liked life better as a woman. Machiavellian garters. Lil pressed her full lips together and said nothing. She despised Sal to a psychopathic degree. To be fair, I wasn't exactly a member of Sal's fan club myself. I took another step or two back from the table, maintaining my distance from the fuming Benny. This also had the effect of bringing me closer to the edge of the crossing. I could feel its energy vibrating against my cowled wings. "Just hang on a second. I don't work for Sal," I objected. "Yeah, pull the other one," Benny replied. "I remember you from the Statler when Joey Pirello called his big meeting. That was decades ago, so don't pretend you're a normal guy. What are you doing pissing around my mama's restaurant?" My mind raced down the few corridors of memory left open to me, trying to make sense of his accusations. All I dredged up was some vague knowledge of an old mob meeting at the Statler Hotel from the late 20s. If Benny had been around back then, he sure didn't look it. Then again, neither did I. Lil stood slowly, one hand on her little clutch purse. If I knew the Lady of Beasts, her trusty derringer was tucked inside. She turned on the dazzle, flashing an apologetic smile to Benny as she said sweetly, "Sorry, blind date. This always happens to me." The stumpy bartender flicked his gaze toward my companion, but evidently decided she wasn't much of a threat, which was incredibly stupid on his part. He turned his glare back to me. His bloodshot eyes were set close to his great potato of a nose, the brown of his irises so dark they looked almost black in this lighting. "We had a deal," Benny growled. Let's say I don't precisely remember the terms," I stalled. "Don't play dumb with me. That pulse sucker Sal asked us to stay out of his business, and he promised no one would come poking around in ours," Benny said. He stabbed a sausage of a finger towards my chest. "You're poking." Pulse sucker. Sal was the next best thing to a vampire, and Benny knew it. Which begged the question, what the hell was Benny? While I struggled to remember any salient information that didn't involve knowledge picked up from history books, Benny advanced on me. He shook his knuckles again, and this time I could practically taste the power gathering around them. Tiny dark stars in a tightening orbit. Of course the mob in Cleveland had magic. Why did that even shock me? The whole restaurant fell silent around us. Not a single person moved either to interfere or to flee. That was a bad sign. It meant they were used to outbursts like this. The dark-haired girl at the hostess stand stood rigidly, copper-penny eyes fixed on Benny. Focus, not fear, etched her expression. The fingers of her left hand were threaded in a peculiar gesture. Power crackled around her. The magic was a family affair. Lil stepped neatly around the table, nudging me toward the exit. "I know a great Thai place just a block over," she chirped. "Italian always gives me indigestion anyway." She had the "I'm a normal human" mask so firmly in place, even I wanted to believe it. I started to turn away from the crossing and head toward the front door. The hostess watched us warily while Benny practically simmered with a pent-up desire to clobber me. The ghost coalesced into view just over his shoulder. She locked her pleading eyes on mine and mouthed, "Help me." 2 words I found irresistible. My mouth started racing before good sense could catch up with it. I told Benny, "You have this dead girl attached to your restaurant? Did you know that?" His features darkened, that orbit of power growing more concentrated. Running would have been the smart thing, at least until I knew what the hell I was dealing with, but I couldn't stop myself. African descent, 20-something, looked like she's dressed for Easter Sunday. I get a feeling someone murdered her. You know anything? "I warned you," the bartender bellowed. "Why can't you come with a mute button?" Lil growled. "Guess that's a yes," I said. Benny cocked his fist back and lunged. He moved with all the grace of a Sherman tank, and it was a good bet he was going to hit like one. I dodged the first blow, but he followed it up with a murmured incantation. A little late, I realized he wasn't so much trying to sock me as throw something in my general direction. Little black sparklers burst in my vision, and the whole world smeared like an impressionist painting. I scrubbed at my eyes. It didn't help. "What the hell?" I sputtered. You'll back off if you know what's good for you, Benny snarled. He was already calling up another salvo of whatever magic he'd dished at me. I'm not with stupid here, Lil declared. She took a decisive step away from me. And I'm leaving. Benny spat on the floorboards. Good idea, sweet cheeks. Sweet cheeks. A spike of ozone tickled my nose, and I thought for a moment that he'd pushed her too far. But then I heard the harsh rapport of her heels as she marched toward the front door. The hostess threw the deadbolt once Lil was out. I still couldn't see clearly, but I could hear the girl's voice. She murmured rhythmically some kind of chant. I could feel lines of power tightening around the space. She was locking the wards down, and those were a way bigger problem than deadbolts for me. We're playing for keeps now, buddy, Benny said, winding up for another spell. How many times have you watched Scarface? I asked. Nobody talks like that anymore. While Benny sputtered a response, I turned toward the psychic stain of trauma soaked into the space behind me. I was certain now it marked where the ghost had died, but that meant it was as good as a doorway for me. I caught my breath as I plunged through the crossing. I knew he wouldn't see that coming. The veil, or whatever Benny had thrown across my eyes, peeled back as I tore through to the Shadowside. The last thing I noticed before the fleshlands slipped away was one of the old photographs. It looked like it dated to the 30s. Two squat, broad guys in shirt sleeves and suspenders stood on either side of an old white-haired matron. She had eyes as black as a starless sky and a smile that shamed the Mona Lisa. The guy on the left was unmistakably Benny. The other guy looked like he could have been his brother. A plaque under the picture read, "The Boys with Mama Tuscanetti." I had a name. Names were power. That would... I see some notes that there's probably idiots on here to block, but when I'm reading, I can't really block you. So, hey, flame away and be douches. That's fine if it gets you off. I hear you. Fat, 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 fat. Yes, I just did that. And for the folks who did show up, yeah, you know me. All the rest of you know me. Thank you all for dropping in. I'm going to stop there and probably see you guys for panels tomorrow. Give them hell. I've got the employee entrance keys.